Welcome to Spoilers Intended, a podcast about series, novels, and films. For this episode, we follow a hero once rotund, see a transfer of power that might leave you stunned, and Marvel really hopes the fans haven't become numbed. That's right, we're talking Thor Love and Thunder. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. I'm Stephen Ford, joined as always by Andrew Knuckles.
Hello there.
And Joel Killingsworth.
General Kenobi?
No?
Hello. All right.
Hello.
Fine. Yeah, there we go. Hello.
Also joining us for this episode, we have a special guest, Ryan. Oh no, I forgot his name.
Dan Lee. Dan Lee.
Delaney was totally my option.
Just say Ryan. And I'll say Denley every time.
I'm going to start doing it. Yes,
we can.
We don't need to restart that.
No,
it's just that's
it's
just what
happened.
it is. Yeah.
It happened.
Hello, Ryan.
Hey,
What's up,
Mr.
y'all?
Delaney.
How's it going?
Gosh.
I get Delaney a lot.
I don't know
Yeah.
where that came from. Boy,
I'm
it is
surprised.
hard stuff.
I mean, out of the years that we've been podcasting, you've never messed up my last name once, which is impressive.
it's
Knuckles. That's easy. To
It's I look at you, I'm like,
He's
Sonic.
the coolest
no, not
character
quite,
from
not
the
quite.
Sonic
I get
games.
Nucleus, Knucklos, Knuckles, which is completely wrong because it doesn't even have a
That's a lot of effort, yeah. Anyways, moving on into something that's almost sort of relevant to what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about Love and Thunder just yet. We're going to talk about something related to it, though, because we did like it. We're going to talk about some cinematic reels, some openings or closing credit reels that we really liked and appreciated because, spoilers, Love and Thunder might have a good one. Who wants to take this first?
Not me.
I'll go ahead and take it.
Okay.
I brought a classic piece of Disney animation for consideration, and that is the animated film 101 Dalmatians.
Yes.
The opening credits, and this is back when, by acting guild rules, the credits had to be all up front at the beginning of the film so that the audience is force-fed all of the credits, and they have to acknowledge everyone who, did jobs.
Worked on the film.
So, it's definitely for a reason. But it's at the beginning of a piece, and your audience has to sit through that. And so it was handled very artistically and with a lot of intention. And in this case, they went ahead and they introduced you to the tone of the piece through the overture and kind of a display of the animation with the little paw prints going everywhere. It kind of gave you an introduction to some of the character models of the dogs.
How the world's going to look.
Yeah. And so it was a really nice, it served that film the way that an overture at the beginning of an opera or something like that serves that piece of media, where you get a sampling of what you're about to receive.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go next. We'll just go up in an ascending scale because I'm pretty sure I am next.
You are, yes. I'm last.
So the thing I love about intros or endings is that it really gives you a window into the tone and feel of a piece of media that you're about to kind of watch. And one of my favorites is Goldfinger from James Bond. And you have this heart-pounding score from Shirley Bassey, also Goldfinger is just the name of the song. And then you get basically these motifs and silhouettes of very pretty girls that are basically painted gold with the projector of all the characters and different scenes from the film kind of projected onto them over a black background. And you have this, really powerful song while this is kind of happening, and it really sets the tone for this film being probably one of the most quintessential James Bond films of all time.
Yeah.
Whether you like Sean Connery or not as James Bond, or whether you like the older films compared to, Daniel Craig or whatever, this is still one of those films where everyone knows Goldfinger because of how iconic the film is, the gadgets, Odd Job, everything like that. But then you also have just amazing music by Shirley Bassey and this just fantastic opening sequence that really kind of set the trend for basically all of the other James Bond films to ever come out after it, because like Dr. No didn't really have one, if I remember correctly, and then From Russia with Love was it was kind of in the same light, but it wasn't as honed in as this one was.
Yeah. One, two, like you could probably show somebody that intro to Goldfinger and it would just be like, this is what the 60s Bonds were like.
Yeah.
This is what the Connery Bonds.
Yeah.
This
And
is a good,
it's just like a
mood
time
piece.
capsule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
I'll go next. I went with the 1998 anime Cowboy Bebop.
Oh, man. Perfect.
See, if Ryan went after me, that would have implied that he chose the live action. He would have been wrong.
I would have been very wrong on that.
Oh, man. Don't know.
We don't speak of that.
But we did. You can check out our episode.
If you'd like to hear this.
Plug the material.
Yeah. I remember, the first time I saw that anime, it was on like Toonami. I remember catching it like late at night, when it was on in the early 2000s in America.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember like just that theme song, like Tank by Yoko Kanno, and just the way they animate it. It's such a very cool, like, and again, they don't really use a lot of like scenes from the show or anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's all made, for
the
this opening. Yeah. And I would say, it's, to me at least, one of my favorite, if not my favorite anime opening. Just because it encapsulates, kind of like Goldfinger, everything you need to know about the show without showing you the show or showing you anything from the show. It's just kind of like, this is the mood piece that kind of like is representative of the whole thing, and like just the silhouettes and like the way it moves, and
very film noir.
Yeah,
it's very much so like, hey, this is the style that you're going to get. It doesn't tell you anything about the story. Gives you a little idea what the main characters look like. You get the silhouettes, and their vehicles and these kind of things. But mostly it's just, hey, this show is going to have style, and it's this.
And anime historically has a very bad habit of showing you like scenes from like the show, but then also spoiling things.
Oh, so I'm watching Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood right now, and like I skip the intro a lot because like I'll see and the ending because I'll be like, I haven't got that far. Whoop. Because it just starts showing scenes that haven't happened yet. That's from later in the season. And it's like, man. But yeah, with the the Bebop intro, it's like one of the only things I don't skip.
Yep.
Like when I'm rewatching a show or something.
That is
every time it hits, I'm like, I gotta watch the whole thing. Okay.
Oh yeah, no, it's good.
Yeah. Let it wash over me.
Lay that jazz on me.
Yeah.
All right, so I guess that just leaves me, and I went with The Adventures of Tintin. That's the 2011 movie. And so it is, because they only have the one movie, or I think they're coming out with a second one.
I believe that they're coming out with the second one, or
it's at least planned.
There was word that it was going to happen at some point. Right. Whether it still happens, who knows?
So because you have the one movie and there's 30 plus comic books of Tintin, they kind of mishmash some storylines in the actual movie itself. So as kind of an homage, not just in that, in the opening, you get this really great. It's very much so kind of silhouette, very iconic. You immediately know who these characters are. And you kind of follow Tintin through a lot of other adventures that won't be in the movie, but that if you read the comics, you'd recognize this character or this scene or this, car or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's all kind of played around the actual cast names as it comes in, produced by, and like, Tintin and Snowy land on the two different words and they fall out underneath them and that kind of stuff. And it's a John Williams score. So you can already kind of you can hear it in your head because it's John Williams. We all know what it sounds like. But it's this great little run of just kind of adventure, and you see all these, silhouettes of iconic characters and moments that aren't really going to happen in the movie, but it also kind of, at the same time, they run like the newspaper reel of, various stories Tintin's broke, as kind of providing almost a little background to the character already.
Yeah.
Before you get into the movie.
I think it's really important that those kind of intros do kind of give you a little bit of extra information about your character sometimes, because it lets you kind of relate to them pretty early on, or at least understand kind of like, oh, this is an easy way to tell someone's backstory without having to actually tell you.
Right. It saves a lot of writing in the actual film.
Yeah. And I would say that there's potential for that to be used not for characters, but for the world or the situation. Whatever it is that is the most critical piece of information that you need your audience to understand before the story can start.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you don't have to waste time with exposition.
Yeah.
Because it's already there. Like if you watch the intro, unless you're Joel, then he watches it once every time.
Shots
It's
fired.
fine. But basically, if you watch the intro, then you're going to have that information already, and it's going to help build onto that story.
Provided it's a good intro. Sometimes the intro tells you too much. I don't need to know that.
Yeah,
well, I think all the intros we picked kind of do that similar thing of like they show you something or inform you in some way.
They set the stage, right?
Yeah.
And that's obviously a very critical thing, because sometimes you end up in very outlandish places where you may not totally understand what the forces and whatnot at work may be. We'll hit quota right now. We have classic the Star Wars scroll where it's just, hey, read this and figure out how the universe works, dummy. And sometimes you don't get something like that, and you just have to kind of figure out the universe as you go, which takes us to Thor, Love and Thunder. And I think we need a little bit of understanding what's going on, and that means it's time for a synopsis.
Okay, so this is the fourth standalone Thor film in the MCU.
Which is actually pretty crazy just by itself.
I think it's the longest running
I'm pretty sure it is, because Iron Man only got 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, we've got quite a bit of history with the character, because he's also in like all of the Avengers projects and all of that stuff. So at this point in Thor's life, he has basically lost his entire family, and his home of Asgard was destroyed. The remnants of his people are living on a small colony on Earth, and he has gone through this whole cycle of coming to terms with his own failure in like the end game stuff, and he's just kind of vibing and trying to figure out who he is, right? And he's just kind of kicking around the universe with the Guardians of the Galaxy. That's where we left him off at in Endgame, and so he is at this point more or less an iconic hero. He's not really undergoing any more growth or change. He just kind of hit this state.
Yeah, he is who he's crystallized.
So the actual plot of the film centers around both Jane Foster, who Dr. Jane Foster, who it was already handled in the trailers that she ends up with Mjolnir and gains Thor's powers
somehow.
And so that's
mysteriously.
Actually, that's one of the parts of the movies that does make sense. We'll get to that.
Oh boy.
But then, so that's like one half of it with that stuff's going on. And then you have the villain of the piece who, he gets a special weapon and he goes on a god killing spree, and he's just going to wipe out all of the gods, which Thor is ostensibly one of. And so he objects.
Yeah.
That's the premise of the movie.
Yeah.
Thor objects.
So what do our scores?
So our scores, which we have 2 of, we have a technical review score and an entertainment value. And the technical review is an average across our 4 pillars of review, that being spectacle, performance, score, being the music, and plot. And both of our scores are actually very, very similar this time. Usually they're relatively close, but they can be quite different. Today, they are almost identical at a 6.4 technical score and a 6.3 entertainment value score.
Not the hottest.
Nope.
Nope. There have been better.
Yep. And that is out of 10. That's not out of 5 stars. So
Woo! Interestingly enough, I think we got pretty close to critic scores on this. Last time I checked on Rotten Tomatoes, it was like a 68%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's not how Rotten Tomatoes does it, but it's still fun that we're kind of in that realm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Rotten Tomatoes is a binary yes or no.
Yeah.
Basically, it's like, did I like it? Did I not like it? We have a little bit more in-depth review.
Do we want some scores from Ryan?
Yeah, my technical score was a 7. Entertainment was a 6.
On
Okay.
pace.
So it's roughly in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
He didn't have the benefit of averaging into anyone, so he's restricted to whole numbers.
I'm restricted to the whole number.
I was wondering, because like we have our spreadsheet, and then you're just kind of out on your own little island here. I was wondering how
black
you
and white moon
like the film.
Well, you know now.
Well, I know now.
We'll know more later, though.
Yeah. So this movie feels like it was Taika Waititi or just MCU in general just trying way too hard.
Yeah.
It felt.
Well, I want to kick this off with some numbers first.
Sure, go ahead.
Before we really get into this, stats. Anyways, so for the weekend, domestic gross on opening weekend, 143 million, which is more than Thor Ragnarok at 123, less than Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness at 185. And of course, it doesn't have the benefit of connecting to anything else here. As far as we know.
I mean, it does have the benefit of connecting to Ragnarok, which was wildly popular. But
obviously didn't make as much as...
right. Well, follow-ups to wildly popular films are always going to be more financially successful than the original, because you've got the hype going into opening weekend, as opposed to, well, if this is just an absolutely great film that kind of hit out of nowhere, then it's gonna be the subsequent weeks that you get a lot of that revenue.
Slow burn.
Yeah. So they are 302 million total gross as of recording this, including international, with an estimated 250 million production and 100 million promotion. So they're right at break even, just out of the gate almost.
Yeah, I mean, it's an MCU film. It is always going to be a success financially at this point.
Yeah.
Just because the machine.
I am not comfortable making that assertion. If they keep going the way they are in another 2 years.
Well, they want, I mean, like if you keep doing the same thing over and over and expect different results, then, it's insanity. But, I don't know. This movie just felt like it was trying way too hard for what you kind of got out of it. I don't know. I mean, someone else help me here.
So I think that like the best way for me to encapsulate it, right, is that like going into Thor Ragnarok, I had very low expectations.
Yeah.
Right, coming out of Thor to the Dark World. And I was like, yeah, I mean, the trailer looks fun. Maybe it'll be okay, and then I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, because it was unexpected.
Right. Going into this, I was highly excited because I liked Ragnarok so much, and I was let down because of that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the thing that like I took away, because I saw it like on Saturday, and then I rewatched Ragnarok Sunday, because I was like, maybe I'm misremembering how good Ragnarok is. Maybe Ragnarok just hit so good because it was unexpected. Like maybe I wasn't really, I was just surprised. Watch it again. No, it's very solid. And I think if you like Ragnarok, you got to go into this with a different mindset. Like, this is just a big, fun, eat popcorn, kids action movie for Marvel. Like, if you're expecting, because Ragnarok, to me, the jokes hit way more consistently. Whereas in this one, I feel like one of the overall issues is it tries to be like Ragnarok, but there's just like, it's like the shotgun approach. They're just throwing every joke they can at the screen.
It felt like 1 out of every 5 jokes was funny.
Every now and then it hits, and it's like, oh, that like that. But then there's like 2 or 3 things that like, and tonally it kind of shifts very sloppily. Whereas I feel like Ragnarok, not to just keep comparing it to Ragnarok, but it is directly, it's made by Taika Waititi. It's, he basically reinvented how we look at Thor in that movie, you know, and it's like, it can't quite capture the same feeling that one did. Yeah. So if you're listening and you liked Ragnarok, go into this with like some lowered expectations. I still think you can enjoy this movie. I still think there's stuff here that you could like. It's just, it doesn't feel as polished, and is like, they needed another pass at like every part of this movie, basically. Yeah.
So I'm gonna grab the ball of comparison to Ragnarok and talk about it from a different perspective, because I did not like Ragnarok at all.
Okay.
You talked about tone of this film, and my main problem with Ragnarok was also tone.
Yeah.
I felt that the tone of presentation, with all the jokes and the ridiculousness of the situation, was really at odds with the subject matter involved. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You've got the most compelling and dramatic that the character of Bruce Banner has ever been, and he's completely thrown away as a joke in the whole film. You've got this really cosmically impactful event of Asgard itself being destroyed and the civilization of Asgard being brought to its knees into a tiny remnant. And it's just not really mined for the drama that's there. Right. And so at the time when I first watched it, I remember feeling that I would have been really happy with this movie if it was just about something else. Right. And with this film, so I went into this film with extremely low expectations because I just expected the same experience again.
Yeah.
And so I was pleasantly surprised when the tone matched the content.
See, I would say that for me with Ragnarok, it didn't really get serious ever.
Mhm.
And that's kind of, I think, what you're saying is that, like, you know, the like Asgard being destroyed and all that stuff that happened in Ragnarok should have been handled like probably more seriously, but after seeing this, I don't think so. Because like I feel like the bouncing back and forth between very serious stuff in this movie and the comedy stuff, like it just didn't work for me.
I will say that I thought that it actually added layers to Thor's character, because you got through his, like really early on, through his interaction with Quill and the Guardians crew, is that, you know, he is presenting this ridiculous air and making everything about himself. And if that's all you just got his part of it, then you as the audience are coming along with, well, okay, that's just the reality of this film, and it's just stupid. I don't want to watch this. But you have the mirror of their responses to him and their reactions of being like, okay, you're just, okay. And with that, you can see that, you know, you're given a perspective in order to interpret what he's doing and how he's acting, to show that he is in fact hiding from the trauma of his past and not really dealing with it and just treating it with avoidance. And so that to me, to be able to go back and forth over the course of the film with the treating everything with avoidance to actually dealing with some of his past issues with Jane, to me added depth to the character.
So I personally felt like I was being drowned in humor and or attempts at humor just to get to small emotional nuggets. Mm-hmm. And something I've said, at least with this group here, is one of the things I appreciate about Marvel is they're very good at, you have these really intense moments and they're able to cut that a little bit with humor, right?
Yeah. And
this almost felt like I was just being buried in humor, and then they're like, oh, we're going to cut through that with a little emotional here. It's like, oh, thank God. So that's just not, I appreciate it from the earlier methodology, not the latter.
Well, and there are definitely a couple moments in this film that do hit pretty hard.
Yeah. Oh,
and and that do actually have a really good ground of like emotional weight to them. Mm-hmm. And then it's unfortunate that then they just kind of choose, or like, okay, now we're just going to have really like not low brow, because that's like saying that they're digging at they're punching down, but like just not really high quality humor.
We didn't stoop to fart jokes.
Yeah,
but we were like a grade above it. Like at times we were flirting with it.
So it's interesting. So what I'm hearing is whether you like the first, or I shouldn't say like, whether you dislike the Ragnarok more or Love and Thunder more has to do with whether you feel that tonal mismatch is the greater sin or tonal shifts are the greater sin.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, or it's just a failure.
There's a tone issue.
Through. Yeah.
Because I mean, I actually like whenever we watched Ragnarok for the first time, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a fun movie, and I thought that they did a lot of the humor. Definitely helped kind of juxtapose itself against a lot of like the heavier weighted stuff.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like I do kind of agree that like you would think that, Asgard being destroyed would be kind of something that would be handled a little bit differently.
And that's not the worst part of it though, right? Because Asgard is by definition not relatable, right? Like it's not Earth.
Yeah.
These people are all superhuman demigods in their own right. Like it's not like King Kong is destroying New York City, right? Like it's not the same. It's not the same level of relatability. But when you take Bruce Banner, who's dealing with a lot of personal issues, and he does just the face plant on the Rainbow Bridge in an obviously set up comedic moment, when that failure to transform is like the culmination of the drama surrounding his character arc, is a real mistreatment of like your assets going into a story.
Yeah. So moving back to Love and Thunder, I will say that Christian Bale as the bad guy was pretty fantastic.
Oh yeah,
I thought
liked
It
him a
actually
lot. He was
makes
really
me
good.
disappointed that we're not going to get like a Thanos level setup with him as
Yeah,
like a multi-movie.
yeah,
Yeah.
because he did a great job.
Yeah.
And I
Christian
loved
Bale
his-
refuses to be bad in a movie, and I just
I mean, he's a great
Insulting.
actor. Yeah,
and I really loved the costume design too.
yeah,
Because like he goes from the transformation in the opening scene of looking more human, and then as he goes on in the later parts of the film, you've got all of these scars that he has apparently off screen self-inflicted to try to get rid of the marks of devotion that are tattooed all over his body, because now he has rejected the gods that he served and is now out bent on murdering them all.
Yep.
So like that level of character design visually was really pleasing.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you really felt the impact too of the transformation of the character. You
For sure. It felt real. Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
kind of the diseased or corrupted feeling from him and his manner. And they get I think they gave him kind of some weird eyes as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
Helps.
they were.
Yeah.
So something I'd say to kind of like piggyback off of Ragnarok and this and the source material of like, so the Hulk, like they basically tried to work in the Planet Hulk storyline from the comics into Thor Ragnarok and did. I had a friend of mine, I've never read the Planet Hulk run, so I had no like perspective of it, but he hated Ragnarok because that's one of his favorite storylines.
Yeah, and they
basically
they watered it down. Yeah.
This movie is similar in that it basically mismashes two really epic Thor runs, the one with Gore the God Killer and Jane as Mighty Thor, into one movie and doesn't do either justice, apparently. I haven't read either one. I've read
I
part of
can
them.
see that
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
So it's kind of a similar thing in that like
Pick
I
a
think,
lane and stick with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah,
Pick one or the other.
Because both of those, given the way that they were handled, that we'll talk about after the spoiler wall.
Gore the God Butcher, sorry. Apologize.
How dare you?
Could you?
But like both of those have so much that can be mined from them
Yeah.
that it's really hard to fully explore them in a single film by themselves, let alone together.
Well, and I would say, and this will definitely come up more when we get past the spoiler wall, is just that like I feel like some of my complaints about Love and Thunder is that when it does try to get serious and it does try to delve into some stuff with some of the characters, it feels more like just in service of building Thor's character up or having him go through something than actually analyzing what it would be like for the person it's happening to go through it.
Yeah.
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 Which I think is, again, unfortunate because there's a lot of stuff that could have been mined from that ends up, it's more just focused through the Thor lens.
And they're really, I mean, like you would think that because Jane is one of the main characters for this film that she would get a lot more than what she actually did. And it feels like they kind of skipped like a couple different steps in her arc that probably should have been there on screen.
Yeah, she wasn't presented like a main character of the film. She was presented as part of the ensemble.
Yeah, which felt kind of like she got cheated out a little bit.
Like the pacing overall was weird, and that like it's one of the shorter runtimes on a Marvel movie, and I felt like they should have definitely added more time and had more Jane, more Valkyrie, more like there was a lot of characters that I felt like we could do, with more of that, and for some reason they didn't. But then other scenes felt like they kind of dragged on. So I just feel like the pacing was kind of weird.
Yeah, that's going to come up for me as well because it's very strange. Where it's like this is going very fast and at the same time so slowly.
Well, they're I mean, and this is I hate to bring in the bombshell because this is always the indicator of whether a movie's interesting or not. But my wife fell asleep a little bit, like halfway through the film.
Oh no!
She woke back up on her own volition, though. I didn't wake her up.
That's something.
It lost her, but it brought her back.
So it's like I hate to say that, but I mean, like there were definitely a couple moments where I'm just like, man, this is just taking forever.
Yeah.
And I look at my imaginary watch, 2 hairs past a freckle, and I'm like, ooh, man.
Did she wake up when Hemsworth was mostly nude? Is that what like got her to bring back alive?
Oh, hello. It's me, Thor, God of Thunder. You've heard of me. I know you've been suffering under the threat of spoilers, but now that I'm here, you can rest easy. I'll hold off all the spoilery stuff while you make your escape. Get away, relax a little, eat a cheeseburger, and maybe check out the rest of Spoiler Intended's content at their website, spoilersintendedpodcast.net.
.com.
Nailed it. But if you are brave, if you are worthy, then join me beyond the spoiler wall, where we shall revel in glorious battle. Spoilers have done too much harm for far too long. This ends here and now! Classic Thor adventure.
Alrighty, everyone, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed a quick little intermission. In case you didn't get the message, it is all spoilers, all the time, from here on out. We are talking spectacle, and I can't give it to Andrew first because he's yawning, so I'm gonna take it myself.
Just like I was falling asleep in Thor.
I thought that was Holly.
Well, Holly was too, but I was definitely bored.
Well, I'm gonna take this one myself.
Sure,
I'm gonna start off with a 7 for spectacle.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
So I'm not going to take a ton of points because I know a lot of y'all have things to say. I'm just going to throw in my one thing of doing shadow monsters is great for a horror movie. Most horror movies don't involve long combat scenes, so it's okay that you can't necessarily see everything that's on screen. You just need the creeping dread. They went pretty horror with some of the stuff. The literal kidnapping had some definite elements of horror, but Marvel needs a big CGI fest fight, and shadow monsters aren't good for a CGI fest fight.
And they even had the elements to deal with it in the fact that the weapons cast light, which created color, right?
Yeah, you could have illuminated
but
some more.
for whatever reason, it just didn't come through on screen.
There are definitely ways to make shadow monsters and still have them be visible and legible on the screen.
Yeah.
There has to be.
Hands down.
They didn't do those.
They didn't do that at all.
When the village in New Asgard, that fight at night especially was kind of hard to keep up with.
It was such a matter of fact battle that you're just kind of like.
Well, at the same time, they're trying to convey that these are space Vikings, and so they're kind of liking it, right? Like this is life and death, but it's also fun.
Because even leaned into that more.
When the mighty Thor shows up and she's like, there's like this boom, and the shadow monsters go flying off. Thor doesn't really know what's going on yet because he hasn't met Jane. Everyone's like,
cheers.
Yeah, the party's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It just there's one of those where they did a really bad job with zero tension for basically everything in this film.
Oh yeah, tension was not good.
Where you're just kind of watching and you're like, well, that's a fight. He's fighting some shadow over there.
That's a tone thing, right? Like whole, it all comes back to the tone, because you could have had the way that Christian Bale portrayed Gore was sort of zany a little bit, once he was fully corrupt and everything.
Yeah.
With the kids, he plays almost a sort of toned down Riddler from Batman Returns, right? It's a little over the top and not menacing and not tension building.
No. That's performance though. Kind of. It's hard to separate.
It's a tonal decision, I think,
right,
in the direction.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good place to put it, I guess. Who else wants to go score?
I'll just jump in. I gave it a 7 also.
I feel like we're going to hit a lot of those here.
Yeah. And I went back and forth on that score because I feel like there are like the shadow monster. It's a good idea that the execution was questionable. And like you're saying, the tone didn't quite fit. So the opening scene with the Guardians was again, there's a lot of fun action that happens in that scene. There are, different points throughout the movie where something happens that is when they hook the goats up to the front of the ship and they take off. That's a spectacle, if you will, of wow, that's
they get to ride on Rainbow Road. It's fun.
Right. Yeah. It's cool. But then it's in the middle of other stuff that doesn't fit and doesn't quite work. And the whole, when they go to, the planet of the gods and Zeus's intro and all that stuff is crazy, over the top or whatever. But then it I don't know, there's everything felt for me spectacle wise like a 7 out of 10. It all felt like nothing was great. You know what I mean? Everything
Yeah.
was like, oh, this is a cool idea. You almost got there, but then this one execution.
You just didn't you didn't turn it hard enough.
Yeah, like, or you didn't, like something didn't quite click. It wasn't framed, quite right. I think they shot some of this on the volume set, like the Mandalorian. It's kind of similar to
Did they do the whole shadow realm scene on the volume?
who knows, maybe. But I feel like there's a couple of scenes where you can see the lighting is weird and like it looks kind of flat,
Yeah.
and like, so that for me brought spectacle down. Was like, I think they had some solid ideas on paper and some of the stuff works, some of the action is good, but a lot of it is unintelligible of what's happening, especially the shadow monster stuff. And
Joel?
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep the trend going, and I'm gonna give it a 7.
I'm shocked.
And I don't really have any new points per se, so I'm gonna give one good little thing and one bad little thing. And the good little thing was I loved the golden gore in the fight.
Oh,
with,
yeah, that was cool.
with
Yeah.
the guards in the Zeus's court.
And it's like all splattered over them.
And there's that one moment of Valkyrie just reveling in her bloodlust as she's being covered in the blood of her enemies, but it's gold, not red, so we can show it on screen.
Yeah.
Keep that rating low.
And so that was really fun. I'm totally there for bloodlusty Valkyrie. It's great. And then the little nitpicky thing that just like it hit me in the moment and was just so jarring was with the Natalie Portman's makeup for Jane Foster when she's in human form, not Mighty Thor form.
Yeah.
Throughout the entire film is getting more and more sickly, right? Like the shadowy eyes, the gaunt face.
Yeah.
It's very clear that they're depicting she is succumbing to her disease. And then during her death scene, she has
Radiant
glamour makeup and not sickly makeup. And I'm like, this is the moment where we needed it.
Yeah.
That annoyed me.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Okay, so I also gave it a 7.
Shocker.
And you should never come out of a movie and say, I think the credits were my favorite part of that film. And don't get me wrong, the credits were fantastic. Like,
Yes, there's a reason we
there
had
was
this
there
as
was a
intro.
lot of very good typography and styling and everything, and it really fits the theme of the film. And I loved it. Fantastic. That should not be the highlight of the film. And so
it's over. I'm so happy.
And it really actually wasn't like the ultimate highlight of the film. So there are a couple things I actually really did like. I like the concept on paper of like the little shadow world where there's no actual color, and then their weapons illuminate things from the effects of their weapons, which is a really cool concept. And you could have done so much with it.
They did very little.
And
with it.
they did basically nothing.
Yeah.
And it's really sad because there's so much potential there with selective color. And most of the time, a lot of people in the cinema community really like hound pretty hard on selective color because most of the time it's used incorrectly. And this was definitely a moment to where they could have really, because they have the budget to be able to do it right. And they didn't, which was unfortunate because whenever I saw the trailers and I saw that they're like clearly fighting in a black and white world, I'm like, ooh, that's going to be pretty cool. Cause I know this is like Thor is meant to be very colorful and bombastic. And up to that point, I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty cool. And then it kind of happened. I was like, well, that was the thing.
Well, I'm trying to remember what the very first pop of color is. I think it's when Jane uses Mjolnir.
I think so, yeah.
But like when that happened, I was like,
ooh.
okay, here we go.
Oh, this
Here we
is
go.
where we're going to go with this.
We're about to have like everybody's going to be doing their own thing,
And then colors
different
can be
colors, and maybe
Yeah.
and then it just doesn't happen. And I'm like, okay, it's still black and white. It's
Any day now.
okay.
Any day.
Yeah, anything now. It's good, and maybe they end it with they didn't. All right, wow.
Oh, we're leaving.
So
Okay.
So the biggest nitpick that I have is I feel that the further we get into the MCU, the closer we are getting to the Star Wars prequels of just green screen with no actual sets. So like if you go back and say what you will about the film itself, Dark World was not a good film by any means, but they had a lot of fantastic set design. Like that were physical, real sets that were there, and they used traditional like blue screening and everything like that to help, augment that. But they still had the physical sets there, and it made a big difference because the movie still felt very tactile, and it felt like there was actually something there for the actors
Some weight.
to act with.
Yeah.
And the further we've gotten into the MCU, it has now just turned into just this CGI fest for every single scene, where they're just like, oh, look at what all of our renderers can do. And it's like, well, cool, but the poor actors are literally sitting here in a vast sea of green, and they have nothing to act against because there's literally nothing there. And they're like, oh, we'll fix it in post.
At half the time, they're not even wearing
their stuff,
the armor. They're just covered in marks.
And whenever I see stuff like that, it's very disheartening, because there are certain things that you just can never replicate from a CGI set. Like you just can't get that feel of having the things there.
Well, that does require a very commanding performance to rise above such a set design.
Wow, look at that segue.
Oh, you know,
did it.
I had it there. I had to take it. So the real question is, did they provide a commanding performance? Joel, you want to kick this off?
Yeah, I'm going to kick it off, and we are immediately dipping below the 7 line. I gave it a 6.
Okay, not very far.
Not very far down. Chris Hemsworth's Thor is kind of the bare minimum phoning it in kind of performance, right? Like he's just shooting from the hip with all of his lines, is the way it comes across, right?
He's himbo Thor, it's fine.
And, you know, that's the character they want to portray, and that's fine. It does not bring any technical mastery or range to the screen and to the experience. I very much enjoyed Natalie Portman's performance. I thought that her flip-flopping between, again, the bombastic, I'm hiding from my problems, and I very much enjoyed Natalie Portman's performance, flip-flopping between, again, the very bombastic, I'm hiding from my problems sort of presentation, where she knows that she doesn't have enough time to take things slowly and get things right, so she just throws herself at everything right away. And then flipping back to where she's forced to acknowledge the fact that she's dying, and is trying to deal with that as best she can. And I really enjoyed that, and I wish that we had more time to focus on that, because I think that was the really compelling part of at least the hero's side of the whole story. And then again, Christian Bale's presence for Gore was magnificent.
Yeah.
But I think the directing choices for his character really held him back.
Okay.
All right, so I'm gonna
take.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
All right, so I also gave it a 6.
Okay.
And so I thought Christian Bale, he has very much a big like screen presence.
Yeah.
Because he has like the kind of like menacing gaunt face that just works with those kind of characters. And
we all know he was willing to lose a little weight for this role.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. He is
you need somebody to lose or gain weight, call Christian Bale.
Yeah. He's very much a method actor in that sense. And I thought he did a really good job. So I know you kind of mentioned it earlier when he was with the kids and like he just ripped the head off something that I couldn't see on screen.
Yeah.
It had golden eyes. That was about as much as I got too.
It was a shadow worm.
Yeah, sure.
Ish thing.
So I actually thought that scene was pretty good. Like it was pretty. I was like, oh, this is pretty kind of scary.
It's a different kind of scary than just like the cold creeping menace.
It's the first time that we hear him speak after his character setup sequence.
Correct.
Right? And so we've gotten, well, actually that's not true. He does say some things to Thor during the fight, but that's mid-combat.
Yeah, it doesn't really count.
A different tone. It's not just dialogue.
Yeah, this is the first time we see his mental state.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And it is so dramatically changed. This is not a man who is resigned to, well, this is what the world is, and I'm just going to inflict as much pain as I can before I die.
Yeah.
This is a maniac, right? And so we know that the sword is supposedly corrupting him, but we don't get to see any of the steps along the path.
It's 0 to 100.
Yeah. So that is totally a plot thing. We will get to that. However, his final scene, whenever he basically has accepted his death,
that was great.
And you're like, this is the Christian Bale that I know and love.
Yep.
Because like you just see the despair on his face, and obviously the relief that his daughter is back.
Yeah.
And he it's just fantastic. And then kind of going off that, probably the main reason I gave it a 6 was more because he was like he lifted it up.
Right.
Was I love Natalie Portman as an actress. She is not a comedian. And she she does not deliver. And I understand that she was like that they were joking at the fact that she was like not very good at the superhero kind of persona kind of thing.
Yeah.
But even then, like it was pretty bad. She's a fantastic actress, amazing drama. Like if you've never seen Black Swan,
watch Black Swan.
go watch it. Just go watch the live action version of Perfect Blue, and it's great. And but seriously, like. And then Chris Hemsworth just felt like he was phoning it in. And I don't even know if you could count like any of the other characters besides Valkyrie as like anyone
having any weight.
Having any kind of weight, because like you had some cameos like with the Guardians and stuff. And you can't even really count that as like any kind of performance.
Well,
score.
I mean, you have Taika Waititi, who was the entire film and also co-starred as a rock person.
But that's the thing. He just plays himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't play a character. It's just Taika Waititi just doing a narration. There we go.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump in on that.
Yeah, go ahead.
I gave it a 7.
Oh,
mostly because Christian Bale
did
heavy
he
lifting.
lifts the. he must have a lot of back pain.
Yeah. Oh boy. And I do think Portman does a good job with the dramatic
side.
The dramatic side of it, I think. Yeah, she nailed it.
Yeah. The comedy side, I would agree. She's not a comedian. Hemsworth. So it's worth noting, right? So he is the last of the big three still working for Marvel, right?
Yeah, because Chris Evans is gone. Robert Downey Jr. is gone.
So he's been here at this point the longest, because we're going to have another Thor will return right at the end. We're going to have another Thor movie of some kind. So he is still going through this. And I almost wonder if they've reached kind of an agreement of, well, we wanted to keep somebody here.
He's like, oh, I'm just going to pull that paycheck.
If you make it easy for me, well, look, man, I don't want to get too overly emotional. Like, let me laugh and joke and have fun.
Well, that's the news around Ragnarok, right? When it came out, was that he was tired of playing the character. He was done, and Waititi said, okay, well, we'll make the whole thing a joke, and you can just do whatever you want. And he's like, cool, I'll do that.
Yeah. I do worry, because that's going to like we are kind of getting baseline like Thor, like what we need. There needs to be more there.
Yeah.
And some of it is just at this point, we just backed off of him, right? We're not going to put any pressure on him to do a lot of the work.
Sorry, I'm just going to interject here. I will say that his performance in this is not indicative of his acting skill. Because,
no, it's not.
Like, because in Ragnarok and Infinity War and Endgame, honestly, he did an amazing job.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, just to interject again real fast, because I don't want to, but like Thor, this is one of the weaker portrayals of Thor that Hemsworth has done recently. Like you're saying, Ragnarok and the other ones, like I feel like he was better at being quippy, funny Thor. And I wonder if it's not because he had better people to play off of, maybe. And in this movie, he had, like for whatever reason, and that may be more into plot, but like the writing of it, maybe he didn't have as strong of a like, person to bounce off of, like Mark Ruffalo or, Tom Hiddleston. Maybe he had Natalie Portman, and that something about that didn't work. I don't know.
Yeah, we can revisit that.
I was about to say, that was actually my last point. I feel like we really felt the lack of the snarky Loki.
The fact that there's no foil in this one makes it a big problem,
because Thor, as presented, becomes really overbearing really quickly without the constant pseudo equal that is Loki to undercut him, right? And to have the snark or make the face to the camera while he's going, this kind of thing. And we already kind of went this. Portman's not really a comedian. She maybe struggled a little to play off of that. And I don't think Valkyrie gets enough scenes to have a chance to be that character. And then you have Taika Waititi as himself, kind of trying to be that, but he's almost more of a straight man.
Well, he's just a bro.
You just don't have the snark foil that Loki has been for so many movies, and I think it's hurting for that. So
yeah. Ryan,
I'll jump in. I gave it an 8.
Oh,
because of Christian Bale. I thought Christian Bale was great. I think the opening scene gave it an 8 for me alone. Just where he's warning his daughter without saying anything.
Oh yeah,
and with, like just his whole like the intro scene was just like, oh boy.
Because we go into that scene and I'm like, oh. I'm ready for this. Like this is going to be a good.
We're gonna go hard.
Okay, it was just that. Got it.
Right. Yeah. And that was so. But I think I don't want to repeat everything, but I think Natalie Portman did fine. I think they could have the thing I'll go back to is they could have done more with someone as talented as Natalie Portman.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
explore again her character and what's going on with her more. I think Tessa Thompson as Valkyrie, if we could have gotten more of her, that'd have been good.
Yeah,
That's
she
basically
got
the-
basically like maybe 5 minutes of actual screen time.
Yeah, and same thing with Christian Bale as Gore. Like I think, like you're saying that his, that's the first time we get to really hear him speak is with the kids. I wonder how much was left on the cutting room floor of like things that did happen before that that for some reason they cut out. Because I think I heard that the first cut of this movie was like 4 hours long. And then they knocked it down to what it is now because they just had every single joke and every single gag. in it.
Gosh.
And it was like, but I'm like, what did you cut out to put this stuff in there? Because like, is there more scenes with
fighting
her?
other
Is there more
gods.
scenes with
Or like Bale sitting, like, can you imagine Bale sitting by himself quietly and he still has the sigils on him?
And he's cutting them
He
off.
starts to remove it and he's talking to like, what kind of like that? You want to talk about one, the transition, but also just how chilling a scene that can
Oh
be.
yeah.
that would be
like,
great.
Ooh.
I do want to give a special shout out to Russell Crowe as an Italian Zeus.
I had a very hard time understanding him.
I was
wasn't
waiting
sure.
for like Adam Sandler to pop out behind and be like, "You like the Jews," and like, it never happened. And I was like, "Wow!" So I think Russell Crowe, though, I laughed a lot during that just because how ridiculous it was. I'd like to watch it again to be like, was this actually funny or was I just like, what is happening? What is going on? Do I have a fever?
Yeah. Well, also a nice shout out to our favorite Loki that isn't Tom Hiddleston, which is Matt Damon.
Matt Damon.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I think the performance there is good. That's going to come up again for me in plot.
Oh no, I mean,
Yeah.
like it was great, but I mean, it's Matt Damon. He's an amazing actor.
He's a great cameo actor.
Yeah. Continue.
Oh, I was gonna say to justify my 8 was Christian Bale was great and that there were some fun side characters like Russell Crowe and like Matt Damon and stuff
Yeah.
who like was like, okay, that's good. And I think it's more of a theoretical 8 of like if we could have gotten more with Jane, if we could have gotten more with these people, it would have been like a 9.
Yeah.
But since we didn't, I got to knock it down. But then Bale brings it up. And,
Yeah.
So that
Yeah,
was where I
gotcha.
landed on that.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about some score.
Score of the score. I'm just going to go ahead and kick this one off.
Go for it.
So I gave the score a 7.
Okay.
Mhm.
I feel that the lightning in the bottle that happened with Guardians of the Galaxy being able to use a bunch of popular 80s classic rock music is nice and awesome, but yeah, please just stop it.
Just keep it in that film series.
It's the problem with it is that it's easy and it's kind of cheap because all you're doing is you're just like, oh, I like Sweet Child of Mine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. I'll listen to this while I'm watching an action film. Why not?
Yeah.
And that's basically like surface level as far as it goes. Because
I feel like there is always or nearly always a place for that to establish a specific tone very early in the film.
yeah,
Right? Like we are presenting this action sequence to you, but we're giving you this ridiculous piece of music over the top of it to juxtapose the two ideas to let you know that the rest of the film is going to be this way. This is how you should interpret our action.
yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, clearly they just Axl Rose really wanted them to use his music.
He wanted some money.
Or he just, they just paid him a lot of money because the whole thing is just Guns N' Roses, which I've listened to my fair share of Guns N' Roses. I'm not the biggest fan. They have a couple songs that I enjoy, and that is about as far as I go. And after hearing those basically 2 songs of the whole film,
over and over.
I'm good. Like, I don't need to listen to this anymore. And so Michael Giacchino's
Score.
like actual BGM track, it was fine.
Yeah.
Like it was better than No Way Home's because you could actually hear it and it was there.
Well, and he had like some themes that like he kind of came back to.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nothing like overly crazy, but I mean, it was fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just stop using popular music in MCU films, please.
I'll jump in there because I'm going
all
to
right.
just kind of like play off some of what he said. I gave it also a 7. The least favorite part for me was the Guns N' Roses songs.
Yeah.
Because like, I feel like they didn't fit. Whereas in Ragnarok, Immigrant Song is talking about going to Valhalla and like doing all this like stuff.
It's
and
a perfect Viking song.
It's a Viking song. And they only used it, I think, twice in that movie.
Mhm.
And when they do, it's awesome. And it hits. And you're like, oh, wow, okay. In this, they just kept playing Sweet Child of Mine. And they kept playing like, the one
like
part of
Welcome to
November
the
Rain.
Jungle and
And then I was like, so what do these songs have to do with anything that's happening in this movie? Like tonally, it didn't like fit. It just felt like, I don't know, what's some other popular music we could throw in here? And I think too, like the Ragnarok soundtrack was very like synthwave, like 80s. And all the posters for this made it look kind of like it was going to be
the same
similar.
thing.
Yeah. And so the whole way through, I'm like, there's not really a lot of like, you know, synth wavy sounding stuff in this. It definitely, and when we listen to like the actual BGM score, it has more of that like rock tinged GNR, but it's like GNR light. You know what I mean?
Really,
like there's guitars added into stuff, but it's not like good necessarily. But like I do like some of the musical cues and themes that he wove into some of the stuff. And there's some of the more serious moments where I think it like the music worked, and it like really led, especially with Christian Bale, you know, in his performance, like the music in that scene was like working for it. It just overall, like the popular music part of it felt just like the jokes in most of this movie. They just fell flat. It didn't connect. It wasn't like thematically important to what was going on.
Yeah.
Joel?
Well, I also gave it a 7. And
Surprise.
I don't really have anything new to add other than even though the shotgun approach to throwing Guns N' Roses at you every other minute is egregious, it did set up the situation where they do the change up and they hit you with Enya, and then you chuckle at that, right?
So, true.
So I just wanted to point that out and say that there's silver linings in every cloud.
And also possibly some thunder and lightning.
Oh.
I also gave it a 7.
Wow,
I know.
shocker.
Consensus?
I don't know that I have a ton to add here, other than this really, really felt like they sat down and said, well, what's hot right now? Well, Stranger Things made 80s cool again. Top Gun is going to come out whenever we release too. So like 80s are going to be popping up. We should make this 80s themed. And there is nothing else in the movie that would connect. You know, if you just had Star-Lord introduce Thor to this music in a scene, and then he's just hooked, he's like, well, these are all these great bands, and then Thor just fixates on Guns N' Roses, and then Guns N' Roses shows up a lot. I'm fine with these choices.
That would have been incredible.
That would have been great.
That would have fit. Everything would have been.
You gave me no justification to be like, hey, it's time to rock, and we're actually going to play, rock.
Yeah, like why he has like the leather vest on, and like give us some level of justification.
Because again, maybe it was on the cutting room floor.
It could have been, but like Guardians of the Galaxy, right? Reaching back to the start of this, it was part of the movie. It was part of his character, his identity. I mean, they even opened the movie with him singing the opening song. Like he is the song essentially that you're listening to. Like it was immediately connected in, and this never had that. So that hurts it a lot.
Yeah.
All right. So plot.
All right.
Joel, silence here. No one wants to take this first.
All right. I'll give plot a 5.
Okay.
And the biggest, like, there's a lot of individual nitpicky problems that you can come at this with, right? You've got the imbalanced character arcs out of your ostensibly main characters. You've got kind of a hopscotch run through the different parts of Gore's arc, which is not fulfilling, really.
Mm-hmm.
You needed like maybe 2 more like real scenes in there. I think
just show some progression, right?
Yeah.
As he is hurtling towards his own demise, and different levels of corruption.
Yeah.
But all of that is just kind of your character arc writing and all that stuff. But then there's so much of the plot stuff that revolves around how do you set up the conflicts, how do you set up the resolutions to the conflicts, that given the setting is entirely wrapped up in the cosmology of the MCU.
Mm-hmm.
What are the fundamental truths of the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who are gods? What level of targeting? What do they actually do? How do they relate to the Eternals and Celestials that were also introduced into all of this, right?
Yeah. Or do we go to like Moon Knight, and where all those Egyptian gods who wait council, do they come from that party?
Are they, yeah, right. Like, and so you end up in a situation.
Was Khonshu there?
Yeah, like
you end up
it's wild
in a situation where you have no set of rules, right? You have no idea how the universe works. And therefore, when someone says, hey, this is the conflict. This is what's going to happen. And it's because of this, this, and this, which are things you've never heard before. Then you're just like, okay, yeah, sure, I believe you. And then they're like, this is how we fix it. And they name off 3 other things that you've never heard before. And they're just like, everyone knows this. And you're like, well, I don't, but cool.
Yeah. Obviously we would do blah, blah, blah. Like, what's blah, blah, blah?
Everything in the MCU for the rest of time is going to have this problem if it is not a contemporary time scale Earth-centric story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The further you go out, the less impactful the conflicts will be.
So here's a question, because I didn't see Eternals. It was like eternity, like the thing at the end where it grants you the wish.
No,
or
it has
whatever.
nothing to do with the Eternals.
Nothing to do with it.
Okay. It does and this is solely looking at the character design of Eternity.
Okay.
It looks like he's the same order of being that the Watcher is.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know who that is, but
What
From What If?
From the What If series.
Gotcha. But has Eternity been mentioned at all anywhere else ever?
No.
Okay,
Totally,
gotcha.
totally brand new concept. The Necro Sword, totally new. And
that was fine. Like,
it's not fine because every character instantly knew what it was.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a big problem.
He's got the Necro Sword.
You have to have, if it is a concept that the audience does not understand, then you have to have some character not understand it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, the audience is just left in the dark.
It's the long forgotten relic that everyone's heard of.
Right?
What?
Yeah.
Well, I would say, to compare it again to Ragnarok, in that movie, you have, I can't think of his name now, but the crown of the dude that's going to cause Ragnarok, that's going to destroy the thing. At the very first scene, you establish, he says to Thor, if I can get to the eternal flame, I'm going to, destroy Asgard. That's it. And that's the conflict that then at the end, when Thor does that thing, what has to happen is that we got to get this crown into this thing and we're going to destroy Asgard. Like we're going the nuclear option. But the stakes because it's been explained to you that like this is what's going to happen if this cataclysmic event, set of circumstances comes to play. This never does that. Like in the whole movie,
we get a little bit of it with the initial conflict, right? The opening conflict is kind of, we had gods and then they went away and now we're only have turmoil and then it's just, now we have a ton of gods dead and what does it mean? Don't know, didn't look at it, don't worry about it. We'll cover it in a TV series in a few years.
Now, I did want to say one positive thing, and that was the way that the climax resolved. Right? It did not resolve in Thor beating up Gar.
A big CGI fight.
It was
Gore.
Gar's like a fish with a very bad looking fish.
Gore. Yeah. Okay. I got it. I'm
Gore
on board.
the God Butcher.
Yeah. But it resolved through dialogue, right? And that is to be able to do that is a superior experience.
Yes.
It still had a lot of problems in execution because Thor did not seem to give up any of his power to replicate his power in all of these kids, which is a huge logical problem in every other instance where Thor shows up.
Why do we not just have a whole horde of Thor children running
Why didn't he
around?
do that for the Avengers? Just give everybody Thor powers.
Right.
I mean, Zeus's lightning bolt lets him do it. Who knows?
We
He just does it.
All these shadow monsters in Asgard. Thor's just like, hey, everyone here, you're empowered. Let's go.
Give Korg the stuff. Give anyone Thor powers.
Could he not just like give it to like everyone in Asgard to fight Hela in Ragnarok?
Right?
Yeah.
Like, or all of his friends.
So like you could say that each one of them ends up with a tiny fraction and he has to give up almost all of it to do it, right? Like if you make it have a huge cost, then he is no longer sufficient to overcome Gore. And Jane has to show up in order to make him victorious.
They didn't make it.
And then when it gets to the end, when it gets to eternity, he isn't physically capable of stopping Gore. Whereas at that point in the film, as it was presented, Gore no longer has his source of power. Thor is still fully charged. And then he's like, no, you won. It's like, no, just punch him.
Yeah.
So,
the stakes of all that were just sideways.
And it's definitely one of those things too, where like if they went that route, they could have, like there was no descriptive amount of time how long their child powers would last, and you could, like one way to look at it is, he gave them just enough, and basically the amount of power that they can hold is proportionate to their size of their body. So he gives them a very small amount of power, but it is amplified a lot because they are a very small child.
That would be awesome if that had ever been explained.
Right. Well, okay. So what's interesting here is that it is at least operating on a rule that was established in the first Thor film. And that is the inscription on Mjolnir, which is an enchantment, right? Placed there by Odin. And when he gives his powers to the children, he is reciting the same enchantment. So if anyone should wield this weapon, be he worthy, then he shall wield the power of Thor. It's something like that, along those lines. And in the first movie, what that enchantment does is it takes away Thor's powers.
Because he's not worthy.
But in this film, both for Jane and for the kids, it grants his powers. And so, like, that's okay for Mjolnir, because we've already established that it's super magic, right?
Yeah.
But we have never established that he knows anything about runic magic or to be able to create enchantments or any of that stuff.
Or transfer his powers
right,
to
yeah,
anyone.
so like it's just super weird.
Well, I mean, if you're capable of doing this, then you never go to the city of the gods because we need an army. Oh, hey, y'all are all here. All right, gather around, everybody. Come on, we're going to go on an adventure. You know, like problem solved.
Yeah, there are a lot of problems.
Somebody else throw a score out there.
Ryan looks like he wants to talk.
I gave it a 4.
Okay.
My thing was plot wise. There again with the tone switching and stuff. I feel like the movie cutting between certain scenes felt like jarring, and I feel like there needed to be more scenes with Gore, more scenes with Jane to kind of like flesh all that out. I feel like there's a lot of moments where the plot, like, just people just know things, like eternity. No one knows where it's at except for Gore figured out because he found the one journal of that one dude.
That was
was
all over the place in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness too.
But then Thor
same problem.
uses Zeus's lightning bolt as a Bifrost because reasons and knows exactly where to go.
And then Jane just also
somehow,
knows
and
where
then
to
Jane
go.
uses
Mjolnir.
No,
Valkyrie's horse.
Oh, okay.
Which they at least referenced earlier in the film to tell you that it could
do that. Yeah. But then again, did y'all have a GPS to this place? Like, how did everyone just know how to get? It's like they just had to get there, and then it was like
really easy.
All of them had previously found the dagger and went to the
just
moon
about to make
and
the
had
reference.
lined it up.
End of Rise of Skywalker all over again.
Well, and then Heimdall has a son all of a sudden. Why? So we can have like this whole thing where like Thor can like, you know, see and travel and stuff, and that felt weird. Of like, okay, and then I don't know the thing with like Jane and her cancer stuff, I feel like the plot and the way it was structured didn't ever put enough weight on it. This is kind of what I was talking about before the spoiler wall of like, I wanted to see like a whole movie with her struggling with that.
Yeah, she wasn't dealing with wrapping up anything in her life. She wasn't dealing with any of her relationships. It was entirely based on how her state of health affected Thor.
Yeah.
And when we're talking about relatable, right? We destroyed Asgard. I can't relate to that.
Yeah.
Well, suffering from cancer.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
We're in real at this point because, you know, everyone in this room knows someone
that had or passed away
or
of
passed
cancer.
away.
Yeah, I mean, like
everyone is familiar with this fight. So this is super relatable, and we get these little snippets, and they just won't feed us the whole thing. Like, come on.
Well, and like to contrast it with Guardians, the first one, like my mother passed away from cancer when I was 13, and watching Peter Quill deal with his mom.
Oh yeah,
I was a mess in the theater when I saw the first Guardians, and like that scene has always stuck out for me as like, wow, like this movie like really hit on that level. Yeah, mostly because of my personal experiences, but like probably because it was just really well done.
I mean, you know, it's a good scene.
They gave it the amount of time it needed to breathe to launch the story.
And I haven't read the comic runs that, again, they mishmashed to put together for these. I've read part of the Jane run, but like the general idea is that like one run dealt with Gore, you know, and like that whole story played out, and then one run was like Jane. And so I think a lot of the comics fans who are mad at this adaptation are like, you didn't give us enough of either. And you did it again, all in service of just Thor, who, again, for the plot, this is kind of a theme with all the Thor movies. Every movie is how Stella got her groove back. It's like the first movie, he's not worthy, and then he learns, and now he's got the hammer.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember what happens in Dark World enough, but I'm sure he gets his groove back at some point. He probably gets Jane back or something. And then in like Ragnarok, again, he gets knocked down a peg, gets put in check, and then he, finds everything at the end. And then in Infinity War, and he always gets like knocked down, and then Thor comes back. And this movie's the same way. Like Thor starts off, and then like he's got to like find his way back to.
Because that's the thing is like when you have these characters that are essentially just gods, and they are immortal, and they can just kind of do whatever because they're just magic. You need to find a way to sideline them long enough for the plot to actually happen.
It was a fun note to show how much more powerful Thor was than basically everyone else that he ran into, because elsewhere in MCU projects, you just don't really have any sort of sense of power scaling, right?
Yeah.
And so in this film, they did at least do a good job of showing very dramatically in the opening sequence of how when Thor finally got off his butt and did something, then stuff got done because nobody could stop him. I mean, he's not very good at
damage control.
Yeah, but like, the bad guys stopped.
I mean, at one point we were standing him alongside a guy with a bow and being like, "These are both Avengers."
Yeah,
and now we've reached the point where like, okay, this dude is a one-man army.
Yeah,
and there's everybody else.
And then you had, and I will say this, I enjoyed the theme of pseudo sentient weapons being enormous power sources.
You just took my point.
Okay, well you go.
Oh, no, okay. Well, I gave it a 5.
Okay.
But I was gonna start off on a good note. Was my favorite humor outside of just the baffling thing that the weapons are now sentient. Is basically the back and forth between him, basically having to apologize to Stormbringer for talking to Mjolnir. And trying to get back with his old buddy. And those got like genuine laughs.
The best one is when he like figures out he can pick up Mjolnir again, and then she walks away and it just slides slowly into the screen. That got me pretty good. I was like, wow.
And that was honestly like a fantastic level of comedy, and I'm that was definitely one of the more enjoyable parts of the film. What really like took it away from me was the film just has no consequences. Okay, so we have these shadow monsters and stuff, and they kidnap the kids and everything, but they're not once do we see the actual threat of these monsters, because all you just see is these people just fighting them and they're winning. Like same thing with Thor, with Jane, with Valkyrie. They're just having their big CGI fight and just killing them and no big deal. There's no implied threat beyond the fact that these things can just randomly immobilize anyone at any given moment in time. Why didn't Gore just use that all the time? Because like he could have just gotten Stormbreaker immediately, I guess.
The stakes and how any of it like matters is very sloppily if at all explained. Like it's very hard to track like, so what's the stakes of what's going on? Like it took me forever to figure out like, what is Gore trying to do? And like why?
Well, so no, like, a lot of times whenever you see these action films and you have like these, I'll say like relatively more nameless monsters that you're just not used to seeing, you need to have an example death you need to have someone that is a no-name character that you're even mildly remotely have an idea of who they are. Red shirt, Star Trek, and they just get brutally murdered in front of everyone, and now the threat level of what these things are capable of doing.
Right. Well, and they have the huge problem, like, well, we kidnapped a bunch of kids, time to act menacing to kids, and it's like, okay, Marvel, we all know that we're not going to just slaughter children on screen.
Exactly.
Like it's not going to happen. I mean, Gore's daughter dies early from starvation and the collapse of society. It's not a brutal death. They're not going to do that to a kid.
And there was never any sort of acknowledgement that Gore was doing this to children, right? Because like that's his whole motivation. And so whether we see him justifying it to himself, or conversely we see him acknowledging that him holding them is a bluff and he's not actually going to hurt them.
Yeah.
Right. Like either of those things would give us insight into his character that we just don't get.
So another way to go about that is, so whenever they all get kidnapped, let's say that someone, red shirt, gets it, that is an adult, that also gets basically like they try and save the kids and they get dragged into the shadow abyss with them or whatever, and then they get caught in the cage, and then Gore comes along and he's like, hey, you're not supposed to be here. You're not a kid. I'm going to murder you in front of all these children.
And then you have the Thor vision.
Yeah.
And he's like, they killed such and such. Like,
yeah.
oh.
Or Thor sees it happen.
And now you have an actual realistic consequence of like, this is what Gore is capable of doing.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, he's only killed gods, and
we've only seen one.
We've only seen one, and that was because of vengeance for his daughter. And there was really
and the
no
guy
other...
really deserved it. So
yeah, he earned that one. We were definitely on Gore's side at that point.
Yeah. And it's definitely one of those things where like, but up until that point, it's just gods. And as far as I'm concerned, a god is someone that is an immortal being that can just kind of do whatever they want, and they probably need to be brought down a peg or two. And especially in the MCU, because there's clearly so many.
Yeah.
And with that kind of thing, you know, you need to have a real world consequence for stuff to happen. And they just never had that in this film because any kind of actual threat was never actually a threat at all, because the only threat was cancer. And we already knew the inevitability of that.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Well, we also never get any kind of like Gore's whole thing is like, these gods are arrogant and cocky and they don't care about their followers, and then all we do throughout the rest of the movie is show gods be arrogant and cocky and not care about their followers.
Yeah,
even Thor is like arrogant,
and
like, you know, and you're like, so
who's the bad guy?
at one point I was like, wait, I think Gore's on to something. I don't know. Like,
and I mean, they try to spin the narrative to be like, well, he doesn't have the full picture and he's going to kill other people who are not that way. But we're not given those examples.
They never show us a god that's like doing good things.
Naturally
well, they
benevolent.
They don't even explain what a god is, what their place is in the order of the universe, and what they do, and why their death is bad, and none of that.
Yeah.
Steven?
I gave it a 6. I felt like so my issue initially was I knew in my heart of hearts that I was being too kind, but until listening to y'all, I was struggling to find one thing to just grab a hold of and just hold on to it.
And so you were too kind.
So I was too kind. So Gore's plot and scheme with Thor is pure luck, right?
It is.
So if the concept is, well, I need Stormbreaker to open the pathway to eternity. Well, you fought Thor with Stormbreaker in Asgard. You don't need to kidnap the kids. Thor takes Stormbreaker and throws it at something, and then you
grab it and run away.
You run away.
I mean, clearly he has teleporting powers.
He's gone from planet to planet. He can teleport,
and clearly anyone can just pick it up. So
yeah, it can go to anyone. Apparently, does not have the same restrictions that Mjolnir has. And later in the movie, it's held in place with just shadow hands. Well, he has plenty of shadow hands. I mean, I don't understand. Like, Thor throws the thing into the head of a monster.
But you see, Stormbreaker was mad at Thor.
And that's where the luck comes in. The only way it works is because the now sentient weapon is having a lover's tiff with Thor. And now, well, you didn't, like, if he was pulling the strings in the background to create that, we have another Thor. I wonder how we could play these off each other.
Yeah.
That's just
we don't get that. Yeah.
As ridiculous as that sounds,
the mustache twirling.
That's still an improvement.
What's the bad guy from Inspector Gadget? Mad
Dr.
Cat?
Claw.
Dr. Claw. It's just Dr. Claw, just like, ooh, yes.
Yeah. So everything for his scheme is just luck at that point, because for all he knows, he's not going to be able to wield it because he hasn't even tried. He didn't try to pick it up. What if he tried to pick it up at Asgard, or not at New Asgard, and failed, and now he has to come up with a new plan? Or we could have seen at that point the fact that maybe he discovered this journal that led him the way after killing some other god, and we could have gotten that in another scene, or just any plot development. Please, I'm begging you. The movie was so fast, and it was also so slow, and I got 2 halves of the story that you didn't tell me anything about.
Well, I think you could have played up just the, like, maybe Stormbringer and Thor do have a falling out, and he won't come back to Thor when he's trying to call it, and that's how Gore just reaches out and snatches it, or, you know what I mean? Like, there could have been any number of, like, comedic setups that lead to a scene that explains how he's able to get it away from Thor that they didn't really.
Well, what's interesting too is for a lot of Marvel movies, we've almost seen the flip of kind of the hero's journey, right? Where we really look at the villain, and the villains cannot beat the heroes initially, and they regroup and they come up with something. Loki does this a lot. He comes up with something new, and now he has a way to win, and now the heroes have to step up. Gore didn't do that. We did not get that kind of structure at all. And we never got a remotely enough story to play off that structure. So that's really where the core of my complaint was going to be. And then y'all all keep bringing up other things. Because it's one of these things where they're like, well, how did we do this? Magic. And I'm like, well, that's minus 2 points.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to think about the magic system anymore because you've already told me there isn't one. Yeah. So I just don't, we time travel. Is this minus 2 points? And I'm not thinking about what version of time travel you're trying to use because you didn't try to give it to me. I don't care anymore. So that's kind of where I landed.
You know, that's a fun concept. Maybe at some point we should do basically like the CinemaSins kind of attempt where we grade a movie and we basically make a rubric of like negative points and then what actually gives you points back and then see where certain films
but it has to
go up and down.
It has to
you can go negative.
Yeah, it has to be possible to go negative.
Yeah. Time travel. That's a paddling.
I was just mad we didn't get a scene where Jane transforms into Thor for the first time.
Yeah,
I wanted to see that so bad.
Yeah, like come on.
Yeah, like that would have been such a cool
and it's
what
not
is happening?
It's not like it's confusing or unexpected. It's in the trailer.
Sure. Yeah.
That's going to happen. So
I will say I do like her. Well, this is more entertainment, but
let's do it. I think we've got all our plot scores out, right?
Yeah.
Let's go. Let's do entertainment right now.
All right. So entertainment, I gave it a 5.
Ooh,
and
spicy.
But good things first. I like this has a lot of like really weird plot relevant stuff, but I like the fact that she can like make Mjolnir into a shotgun and just like have them all like fly around.
Cool.
And
I liked that.
Yeah.
But then why can't Thor do that? It's his powers, right?
Well,
Mjolnir is
right.
broken.
And that part of it is not coming from his powers. It's coming from the metal that Mjolnir is made of.
No, but why couldn't he just like put Mjolnir back together like she did?
It didn't want
to come together. We don't look at the magic system too hard.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying.
No, I agree.
But it was very cool for her to be able to like break them apart and then they all kind of fly around and stuff. That was
yeah, the first time that happened, I was like, ooh, okay.
That was pretty cool. Again, I really like the idea and the on paper of a shadow world where like only like the lighting effects from the weapons light it up and create color. Unfortunately, you just didn't go far enough with it. You should have basically sold out for it, and that would have been a much better finale location than basically the heroes losing location.
Yeah.
All right, I'm probably gonna be the kindest one here. I gave it a 7.
I gave it an 8.
No, I didn't give it an 8. Get out of here. I gave it a 7. And I really just have negative things to say about it because I mean, at baseline, it was mostly what you expect from the Marvel formula, right? And that has a pretty hard floor at this point for entertainment. There's going to be some good humor. There's going to be some high points. There's going to be some cool scenes or set pieces or fights or whatever where you go, oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And man, did I have to wade through a lot of attempts at humor to get there.
And then there were some good gems in there. Like the goats were fun. I know you didn't like the goats, but I liked the
goats.
I like the goats. Made me chuckle every time.
I admit I laughed at the goats.
I am the only one here. The goats
because
destroyed.
It's such a, I don't know, like it's a clever way to use world building in an unexpected way because you've got these goats that are legitimate beasts of burden. They are actually useful. They do good things. They are plot relevant in their implementation, and they just have this one quirk that makes them also a comedic piece.
And you get a good point when they come into the Zeus, like they break the glass as they come in, right? You get that's a good one.
Yeah.
But it ruined me because it literally made me question myself of how recent was the screaming goat thing on YouTube? Was that like that wasn't recent, right? That was old. I was like, I'm not going to be that person and take my phone out and look this up in the movie, but it bothered me and stuck with me. And then it turned out, I was like 9 years old. Like, dude, you are slamming 80s nostalgia here. And then this is just 2010s, and I don't care about that. And also, we're slamming 80s nostalgia for no reason because nothing about this relates to the 80s.
I was going to say, were they?
No, they were. It's just time to jam out to some Guns N' Roses while we, break out the old school KFC bucket and no, that's Stranger Things. Sorry. Let's try that again. And it's just, if you want to go that hard into that kind of musical theme, there has to be something to back it on screen, and there just never was. So those couple of things really ruined my suspension of disbelief, or really failed. Like, it could have pulled me into this world, this maniacal, insane world where Zeus is Italian/British. And again, we're in another world where stab wounds to the gut are fine. It's fine. We're okay.
Sternum. That was center of mass.
Well, I'm not talking about Zeus. I'm talking about Valkyrie.
Oh, okay.
But we actually didn't even see where she got stabbed.
I'm pretty sure.
No, she said she lost a kidney, so it's just like she just lost a kidney.
It was torso.
And they at least made it say, "Oh, I lost a kidney." And it's like, okay, well, that was some kind of.
And she's also like, you know what? I'm out. Right? Like, so there's consequence to the injury.
There's at least a little there. Of course, obviously Zeus. There was no.
But then they sidelined Valkyrie. We didn't get more.
True.
You could have had somebody else to develop something else or something.
Like if her and Jane both had come riding in on her horse, I'd have been pretty down for that.
Especially if it's like Valkyrie is still like hurting. She's just like, no, I'm
and
just the transportation.
Leaves.
Yeah, I'm just the transportation. Yeah. Anyway, someone else?
I'm gonna let Ryan take it.
I'll jump in. I gave it a 7. I think at the end of the day, the reason I gave it a 7, as many complaints as I have, and I looked at my notes just now, we've covered everything. I was like, everything would be just a retread to talk about, what I had for entertainment again. But I think at the end of the day, this is still an enjoyable movie if you can just turn your brain off and like eat popcorn, drink beer, whatever, like, and just enjoy it for like the flashing lights, the goats screaming, that kind of stuff. Whereas I think there are genuine Marvel movies like Thor: The Dark World and other stuff that's just a bad movie. Yeah. That it's not enjoyable.
Iron Man 3.
And it doesn't make sense. And the plot's weird. You know what I mean? Like, not Marvel movies generally are like 8 out of 10, and I would say this is like a 7 out of 10. That's what I gave it. Like it is a step back from, like, I liked Multiverse of Madness better than this, but like,
probably because you like
much.
Sam Raimi.
I love Sam Raimi. I am
you're a horror fan.
Bit of a Raimi fanboy, so that definitely spoke to me. But like, I don't know. I everyone in the theater I watched it with was laughing when I wasn't a lot of the jokes. So I think the average person could enjoy this a lot more. Yeah. And I don't want us to come across like we're just trashing it too much. I don't think it was great. I think it definitely, like I'll repeat, had that problem of like, I went into Ragnarok with low expectations and was surprised. I went into this with high expectations and was slightly let down. I think if you just realign your expectations a little bit lower, you'll be fine. Yeah. It's still an enjoyable movie, but the plot is frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I also gave it a 7.
Wow, I am the outlier.
And normally my enjoyment is a little more directly tied to
the technical
stuff, right? Because like I really care about how characters are treated and how their plot lines are laid out. But story time. So this film, the plot line for Gore is identical to the plot line that of my wife's character in our last D&D campaign that I ran.
Oh, really?
So
deep cut.
She was playing a warlock that made a pact with a magical sword, and her whole deal and the sword's whole deal was that they were wronged by gods and they were going to go on a quest to kill them.
Nice.
And the way by which they were going to do this is they were pursuing access to an all-powerful wish.
Okay.
Literally the same plot.
How long ago was this?
This was it started 4 years ago.
So are you sure that Taika Waititi was
listening in our Discord session? That's exactly what was going on. We wrote this film for him. You're welcome. So the whole time I'm just sitting there enjoying the unintended references. and that definitely elevated my experience.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's a results are not repeatable for every buyer.
So one thing I wanted to ask real quick is like, do you guys think that Taika Waititi is just spread too thin now, like to handle something like this? And that's why, like, cause like I looked it up.
I guess we'll see when he does Star Wars.
He's an EP on What We Do in the Shadows. Man. He's an EP on Reservation Dogs. He's the EP of Our Flag Means Death. He's the EP on Wellington Paranormal. He's working on a new Star Wars movie. He wrote and directed this movie. He like he went from like doing like a project every few years to like the man's involved in everything. And maybe that's just because the stuff he's involved is more high profile, and I wasn't aware that he was like. But he's like a voice on Rick and Morty. He's like everywhere, and I'm
he's
like,
definitely
make money while you can, man. More power to him.
I'm not gonna hassle somebody for making money. Go for it, do your thing. But like, is he? I wonder if his attention is just like Disney and Marvel. It's like it feels like it's too spread out, and they needed to like focus in on this movie to make it.
Also,
better.
There's competing interests at play here, right? Because you don't know how many gyrations they have to go through to get Natalie Portman back to the MCU.
Oh, sure.
You don't know how many gyrations they have to go through to bring someone like Christian Bale in, or to keep Chris Hemsworth interested.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we end up with this kind of two storylines slammed together, where Gore could have very easily been a 2 or 3 movie villain, honestly. And if you told me, hey, Christian Bale is the villain for the next 3 Marvel, like, sign me up.
Oh yeah,
Let's go.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I wonder the kind of conversation they had with Christian Bale to get him to.
Yeah.
Hey, you want to be a Marvel?
Well, yeah, I mean, but like, well, I mean, I guess he was Batman, so I guess it's okay. But I don't really look at him from the Batman films. I look at him from much more of like a serious actor. Everything else,
literally everything else.
Yeah. So
even the Christopher Nolan Batman films were a transition of Batman from a more comic figure to a more serious
a
figure.
darker, grittier Batman. It's 2022, and I'm watching a darker Batman.
Yeah. So I don't know. I probably would never watch this film again. There weren't even any parts of the film that I really would watch again, even on YouTube. Whenever it comes out on Disney Plus, I will pull up the credits and watch those again.
You'll just pull up the YouTube goats screaming like humans and be like, oh yeah, there's the movie.
Yeah, pretty much.
So I will watch it again just because the theater I saw it in, the screen was way too dark and the sound mixing was terrible. So I would like to be able to like
have an actual experience.
Disney Plus it at home.
Have and just give it a second view to be like, do I still feel the same way? I probably will.
Yeah.
Alrighty. I think on that note, that is all the time we have for this episode. Until next time, I'm Steven.
I'm Andrew.
And I'm Joel.
I was Ryan.
You still are Ryan.
I still am Ryan. That's right.
Still are Ryan.
You get to keep that.
I get to keep that. I keep the name and everything.
Still Ryan. You're not Delaney. You're Denley. Thank you for joining us for this episode.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, every spoiler was intended. Thank you for tuning in. If you like what you heard, you can support the show for as low as $1 at patreon.com/spoilersintendedpodcast. We also have a Discord server and would love to have more people joining in the conversation. Links are in the description below. Thank you.